Hello, everyone. Welcome. So we're here with Nick, and he's going to be presenting today. Ivanecky? Ivanecky, I got it right. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is that we're in the Belgo room. Okay. So the session is about mastering the art of global GTM in your team by Nick. And we're going to save 10 minutes at the end for a Q&A, of course. And if you do say anything at all and we give you a mic, just hold the mic close, or Nick is just going to repeat your question so the virtual attendees can hear it. So enjoy. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for the quick intro there. Hi, everybody. How's the conference been so far? Okay, awesome. Good. Hopefully, this room will get some of that energy from the morning into this session. And I'm hoping to make it very informative, exciting, but also very tactical in nature. So I'm going to be using a lot of my background in Amazon to explain how to launch effective products globally and how does that work and look like with go-to-market. So let's first kind of kick off with some key problems in this space, right? What I mean by problems is that, one, it's very hard to launch a product successfully, right? The statistics don't look good. The statistics say 95% of newly launched products fail. That's a very high number, right? There needs to be a better way of figuring that out. Number two, only 40% of developed products reach the market. So where did the 60% go, right? What happened to those? And out of that 40%, maybe like 20% or so actually generate that revenue, right? So there seems to be a disconnect with shipping a product that supposedly you are building for the customers, but then there's a lack of adoption happening. So that's an interesting problem. Another one, and this is a common issue among Agile practitioners, is that there's lack of preparation when trying to launch a product, right? Have we holistically understood the process to get us from the development or the requirement side to launching it to the customer and getting adoption, right? And so, especially even with go-to-market, it sometimes can take half a year just to reach, your customer base, maybe 75% of your customer base. So kind of knowing these facts, the main theme and trend that we see is that launching a product is very difficult. We know that. And so what I'd like to do today with this group is kind of share some tips, some tricks, and a case study in helping you get there. So my name is Nick Ivanecky. My background is in product, so not so much a program manager or like an Agile practitioner, but more product management within Amazon. And so on the B2B side, I deal with B2B customers that need and want to do shopping with Amazon. So very different model than how all of us buy in retail, for example. I've worked in numerous different SaaS companies like Dun & Bradstreet, Adobe, and also I have some fun side hustles, if you will, as an angel investor with Hustle Fund, and I also row as a part-time athlete with US Rowing. So that's a little bit about me. What I want to kind of teach all of you today is the following. We're going to go through some business basics, just kind of how organizations operate and work. I want to then kind of craft what this global strategy will be and look like. I then want to talk a little about different Agile frameworks that can be applied to our strategy. And then I think the most important part is the communication side. How do we communicate effectively with stakeholders? And how do we effectively work with our tech teams, right? I think communication will go a long way, but there's certain tips and tricks to help us get there. And then lastly, I actually do want to share a case study, something that I personally launched last year in kind of explaining what an e-commerce launch would look like globally, right? And I want to kind of put all of the elements of 1 to 5 together so you can understand the concept applied essentially to your role. And then we'll have some Q&A. So that's the goal. So without further ado, let's kind of start with why. Why is a global launch important for your business, right? I think the world right now is quite global. We are not, siloed countries. We are all working together in various different things that countries are good at. And so for a business, it becomes very important to not only focus on your current customer base here let's say in the US, but globally, right? And what that means is it's going to require you to learn about different customers. It's going to require you to adapt your strategies here in the home market globally. And the benefits of that are as follows. You're going to start maximizing your market reach, your revenue. You're also going to start having some sort of network effect about your brand and your business. And again, that could have many different benefits across the board. But it starts to also unify your brand as a company, right? So instead of just being local, now you are a global competitor and someone or something that is admired. What I mean by that is maybe you hire certain talent here in the US, but when you start expanding your brand globally, it has a certain kind of allure or effect. And so, it can kind of have various positive effects throughout the board. And so that's why I think a global launch in, your product area, whatever you're in charge of, is beneficial. Now, something to note, and this is just kind of the basics, right, of the business and your industry. It's important for you to understand how companies operate, right? We have at the top our vision, and that's typically 5-10 years out. Where is a company trying to go? And then we have a company strategy. What does that look like in terms of our company culture? How do we want our employees to work? What are our systems and the way in which we think about our company, right? And then as we go lower down the funnel, we have our product strategy. Think of this as, hey, if I'm an owner of this one particular SaaS product, that is the strategy that I'm focusing in on. And then we have our GTM, which is kind of our talk today. And then we have the tactical nature of our roadmap, right? And that's kind of more hands-on. We figure out what activities need to be involved there. And that is the last thing. And so for our talk today, we'll be in between product strategy and road mapping for global GTM. So quickly, what is a product strategy? In my view, it encompasses 5 things. It encompasses problems, segments, your value proposition, your competitive edge, and your distribution, right? Problem being very simple, go after your key pain points that customers have. A segment just means what is your persona, what is the customer bucket, I guess, that you are trying to target. Value proposition, very, very basic. What value does your solution bring? Competitive edge, how do you differentiate yourself against others? And then distribution, what are some key channels you want to leverage to acquire and retain customers, right? So again, we'll need to have this product strategy to then help inform go-to-market, right? These two are kind of, you need to kind of work together with them. So with that, let's jump into crafting our global GTM strategy. And before I get started, I have a great quote from Seth Godin. Seth Godin is a very fantastic marketer. I think he has tons of podcasts out there right now, lots of content online. And his quote is, don't find customers for your products. Find products for your customers. So given that we are talking about go-to-market, it's paramount to, again, find those products for your right customer. That means really understand the need, understand the persona of your customer, and does that product that you are building actually solve that customer pain point and then target them effectively, right? So with that, this is high level, your GTM strategy. You need to do some sort of market research. You are definitely involving your product lifecycle and team, meaning all the engineers, any tech work and other systems that need to get involved, they are part of it. You need to figure out a way to structure your buyer profile and the messaging in which you want to tell, let's say, your buyers. What does that look like? You then have a special launch. So again, number 4, your product launch. Number 5 is what channels are you going to be launching into? Which ones are you going to be continually getting your prospective customers excited about? And then lastly, it's all about feedback and iteration. So we have a strategy that's all great and done, but can we iterate on it? Can we fine tune it for the next launch? What does that entail? What does that look like? So let's go into each of these step by step to understand, what you can be doing. So step 1, market research. Why is this relevant? At Amazon, we don't start any project unless we have data. And what does that mean? It means, hey, we quantitatively identified a problem gap in our feature space. We saw, X% of users not adopting this. We saw, a decline in revenue over the past year because of XYZ feature or lack thereof. That's the starting point. Now from that, we start researching other trends, right? We start doing interviews, qualitative data, right? And start kind of creating a narrative of is this the right thing for us to do? Is it the right thing for us to launch globally in this space? Well, yes, because we heard XYZ, and it also mirrors what's happening in the US. That's our starting point, right? Next, how products are built. Think of this as a very rudimentary slide on the product lifecycle. So again, you start at the top with all your requirements gathering, typically in some sort of agile format. You, the product owner or the PM, are talking with customers, engaging with them to get that voice of the customer. Then you have multiple stakeholder reviews to vet if your ideas make sense, if your requirements make sense, if that UX is on point. And then once everything is sealed and done, you start your development, right? And that's, of course, in some sort of agile methodology, whether that's Scrum, whether that's Kanban. We'll go into those details soon. And then there's testing, and then there's a launch. So again, high level, how they're built. We'll go deeper into how, in our case study, how, let's say, an e-commerce store will be built. So you'll see more details. So with that, it's important to know your buyer profile and how to message to them. So think about it this way. Everybody in this room is essentially bucketed under a certain persona, right? You can think about how this conference, for example, marketed to all of us today, right? We are either an agile practitioner, we're doing something of an agile sort, or at least having a job function in that arena, and we're essentially that persona, right? Keep Austin Agile was able to define their persona, target all of you to come today to this class and these workshops, right? So it's the same principle that applies to your go-to-market. Figure out who to target, figure out the behaviors of that persona, figure out what are they doing, right? And that's to the second point, jobs to be done. That's another very good framework. I'm not sure if some of you have heard of that, but it's essentially trying to, again, understand the underlying reason of why a customer does the things they do, right? There was a good example a couple years back, actually I think in the 80s or 90s, McDonald's ran an experiment. They were trying to understand why their milkshakes were selling the most for some reason, right? For some reason, customers kept buying their milkshakes, and it was early in the morning too, and they just didn't have a good reason why they were buying all these milkshakes, right? And at the time, like in the morning, what do you normally get? You get a coffee, you get a banana, you maybe get a croissant, right? But those items weren't selling as much. And I think what McDonald's realized over time is those things, basically, they fill you up for maybe 10, 15 minutes, and then you're hungry again, right? It's not satiating. But what they realized is when customers bought a milkshake in the morning, they could slurp on it slowly, right, during traffic. Slurp slow, I'm satisfied. Slurp some more, I'm satisfied. The experience lasted 30, 40 minutes and also made you full, right? And so they realized the job to be done for an early morning customer was to be full longer. And so they realized that. And so, hey, let's start making more deals and offering discounts to get more milkshake revenue up. So they figured that out. But it's not, it takes a while to learn something like that. So it requires in-depth teams, analytics, interviewing customers to get that intuition. And so when you are looking at your buyer profiles, figure out what that job to be done is, right? In my world at Amazon, it's B2B. I focus a lot on, hey, what does, let's say, a government customer want to purchase in Amazon? Well, they're not going to want to purchase adult products. We know that. So, that's a red flag. They want to purchase things for their agencies, for their office, right? Pens, paper, you name it, right? Chairs, office supplies, that's what they want. So let's make it easier for them to buy that selection, not the adult products, right? So maybe we need to create policies to block adult products and keep office supplies. Great. Now what that's going to lead to is more increased revenue for Amazon, right? And I don't know if you've heard of the Amazon flywheel, but that flywheel of them continuously buying products because we have the selection, we have the right price, and the right user experience, and therefore that flywheel of them continuously buying works. So jobs to be done, very important. And then I think lastly, messaging is just how you create the messaging based on the persona. So I think a good example of this is, like I said, this conference, right? the teams at this conference were able to message the right audience members through various channels, whether it's Meetup or whether it's their groups and associations. And saying the right messaging really does matter, because if you are part of that demographic, you're most likely than not going to act. You'll click on it, you'll engage it, you'll come to this conference. So messaging is key. With that, the biggest one that I think in this strategy is about global distribution. So there's a few techniques that you could bring into your product line, a few things to try. This is a holistic list, not something that you should strive to get all things covered in your product, but some things. And so I think these are good ways of focusing whether you want to grow your business or not, whether that's search engine optimization, whether you want to focus on localization, you want to focus on content marketing, social media, paid advertising. There's different, I guess, products that work best in certain channels and sectors. And so when we'll go through our case study, you'll see which ones are more prevalent and better in my eyes. There's also a timing thing to these as well, meaning some strategies for marketing products are better upfront and earlier in your product lifecycle than after. Good example of this might be a blog post or getting content marketing out the door sooner before a launch. Why? Because you're trying to build awareness, right, for the product. You're not trying to get your customers to buy into anything yet because you haven't launched the product. So how do you build awareness, excitement, and then eventually, they're going to start considering potentially, that your company might or your product might solve the problem, and then eventually a decision stage where, hey, I would like to buy your product. These are the right channels to go and do that business. So global distribution. And lastly, with this strategy, I do think that feedback is important. That's pre-launch, that's during, and that's post-launch. So anything pre-launch is, again, through your market research. What data have you found out about the customer? What are they saying about your product? When integrating feedback, make sure that it's across your entire team, all of your stakeholders, right? I think this is important. If you yourself just provide your feedback and don't listen to others, there's going to be limitations, there's going to be hurdles with you working with those teams and partners later on. And then lastly, post-launch, there's always something to learn after a launch. Usually things, for the most part, are well run, but you're going to always have negative feedback, you're going to have mixed feedback. It's good to quantify what those are, share that with your leaders, share that with your teammates, and then build on improving those, right? So that kind of is our strategy. Now, encompassing our go-to-market strategy, we need to define what is success, right? At Amazon, we love using SMART. It's just very easy to understand. And so a SMART goal would be the following. Let's say at the top here, I want to launch a new pricing SaaS product to a German audience targeting 3,000 customers by Q4 2026. When I read that statement, or if I'm even just a leader and I didn't even write that statement, I know exactly what is going to be launched. I know how many customers we're going to get. I know by when, and I know the persona. To me, it's complete. I'm happy, let's say as a director. When I read the second statement, I'm a little worried. I'm like, ship a wellness app for meditation customers. I'm like, I don't even know what a meditation customer is. I don't know how many. When are we launching this? I'm confused. I have more questions than I do a success or goal statement. So try to be, when you think about your go-to-market, always have a good goal in mind. And even better, partner with your go-to-market team, your sales team, your marketing team on creating that goal, right? Because if you're a product owner, you are not in charge of the sales side of things, right? You're kind of in charge of the delivery of the actual product. But you also are sometimes tied to the adoption. Like, why aren't customers adopting your product? Well, sales didn't do their job. That's not a good answer. You need to actually bring them in, and they need to have buy-in, right, to that goal. So again, some nuances there, very relevant, especially at Amazon. I hear this all the time. Actually, I heard it this past week. So very relevant. Work with sales. If you don't, you're going to get the cut, or you're going to hear back from them in some form or another. So recap, right? What does our strategy involve? Market research, product lifecycle, buyer profile messaging, your product launch, your distribution, and then make sure you feedback and iterate. So now let's talk about the fun stuff. Let's talk a little bit about Agile frameworks, and then dive into more on the communication techniques you can bring to your team. So with Agile, right, my favorite go-to is always Scrum. I think it works best in big corporate settings, mid-sized companies. Why? Because it really has a lot of safety nets when trying to deliver products. So predictable timelines, very clear focus on your goals, and my favorite are retrospectives, right? These are very good things to have in anything that you are building, and even big of a company like Amazon, it's something that helps a lot when working with engineering teams. Next is Kanban, and personally, I do like Kanban just for the visual sense of things, meaning I like myself having my entire, let's say, roadmap or things to do on one side and essentially moving it down some sort of status board, if you will, to the other side. For me, I'm a visual learner. It works well. But again, it might present some issues with your broader team, right? Given that there's no dates, maybe harder to focus. There could be issues. But for me, personally, I do like it. And in terms of when to bring it to use, let's say in a global setting, meaning you want to launch it globally, kind of from my years of experience at Adobe, Dun & Bradstreet, and Amazon, it's still best to use Scrum. Why? For regional use cases, meaning it's just easy to organize when you have regional teams and they're all kind of applying Agile Scrum methodology versus something that is more Kanban. So personally, Scrum works best. And that's kind of my recommendation across the board. Amazon does also do a little bit Kanban. It's not personally, I think you can go with either, but Scrum is best. And I hate to admit it, sometimes we do waterfall too. Waterfall is not pretty, but I mean, I've done it before. And in fact, in the example later, I'll explain how we did it, but not my favorite. So retrospectives, right? Why are retrospectives important? I think retrospectives really bring the camaraderie of the team together, right? I think what happened with COVID over the past, couple of years is that we became very kind of quiet and didn't want to communicate with people anymore once we came back to the office. And I think that retrospectives need to come back, and we need to still do them. It's important because you're going to build a better trust with the team, build better cohesion, so that way when problems do arise, people are not, apprehensive. They're nurturing and they want to work with you. So retrospectives can help with that. Sometimes also, especially with engineers and tech teams, they're very shy, they're very quiet. You as the product owner just really need to kind of bring the energy out of them, right? I don't know how you do it, but just bring the energy in. And then they're more likely than not going to give you the right feedback, right? In terms of another good framework that I really like, sorry, this thing's gone. User surveys. So this could work internally. This could also work very good for external customers. So when I say user surveys, one thing that Amazon does, and sometimes it's quite irritating, but they do this all the time, they send out one question survey to all employees every day in the morning. And you have to answer this one question. Hey, what do you feel about my boss? Or do you like your boss and how he's doing this? Or do you like, how the company direction is going? Yes, no, maybe, never. Or do you like where your current, position is at Amazon? No, do not. But it's all anonymous. And so they're just collecting data daily. So can you imagine all that data, especially earlier on, about what is going on with your team cluster, your org cluster, your whole company? Like, it's just wild. And so when they do that, then they kind of share what they learn about their team and their staff anonymously, and then it's you can learn a lot. And I think it's kind of funny how some of the responses are the same. Like, hey, we had a bad week, the survey results show. Hey, we had a great month, survey results show. So it's a good thing, it works, right? And it's non-intrusive. One question a day in the morning, it pops up. You can't get rid of the pop-up. You have to answer the question. I mean, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So again, use the data. Don't just have an opinion about your team and stuff. Actually use the data, inform the team, and then get it done. So next is my favorite section. I think, dang, okay. There you go. So collaborating with stakeholders effectively. I want to ask a question to the audience. Does anybody know this person here? Shout out a name. Anybody? You recognize him? Good. So his name is Robert Greene, and he wrote this book here. It's called The 48 Laws of Power, right? Why do I bring this up? there's very good, I would say, laws in this book that completely relate to you being a product owner and you driving, let's say, execution and some sort of vision in your day-to-day work. And so I want to kind of talk about some of his laws in this book and how it relates to you being a better leader, whether that's product, agile practitioner, etc. So let's start with the first one. Law 13, when asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest. What does this mean, right? Stakeholders rarely care about you. Actually, people rarely care about you. But they care about how it impacts them, right? So let's give an example. I know I want to launch in Europe, and I know my stakeholder is really worried about adoption in, let's say, office supplies. What am I going to do? Well, I'm not going to build products for a different category. I'm going to focus on office supplies, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to help you achieve your goal by building this feature. Let's work together, right? So let's focus on mutual interest and help each other out, right? Law 6, court attention at all costs. There's this famous word in corporate culture called visibility. It's a funny word because visibility, it's either a trap, like, oh shoot, I have visibility, okay, that means you're on the hook for something, or hey, you're getting visibility, that means you're on the promo track, right? So in this case, you want to be on that promo track and get higher up in the ranking. And so you need to always make your product visible to everybody. So visible means, you send out emails informing people that, hey, you're about to launch something big. Or, hey, we're involving all these stakeholders and teams, and it's exciting. We're sending out a weekly update, a monthly update, right? UX is involved. Everybody's involved. We have demo days. Get them engaged, right? Get them excited. And the more you do that, your leaders, like directors and others, are going to start noticing, and they kind of want a piece of the action now, too. They want to know that, hey, this PM who is working underneath this director is also, like he can vouch for you after, right? Because he's on your side, because you're creating all this commotion. Think of it like a content creator inside of your organization, right? You keep posting about it. Everybody knows about you. They want to be you, kind of. Law 23, concentrate your forces. So this one here, it happens a lot where you have so many things to do, right? It's a launch that you want to build and execute on, and you have so many tasks. And you want so many things done by one partner, two partners, right? It's just like, can you do all this for me? Can you deliver it? And that's not really the answer, right? People don't have all the bandwidth and time to help you either. But if you focus on giving them, again, clarity and be narrow with your advancements, right? They're more likely than not going to help you. And you'll be able to get something from them, right? So either that's alignment, that's funding, you name it. So focus your efforts. Law 29, plan all the way to the end. So especially when launching a product globally, you need to work backwards from those deadlines and the customer and plan out those dates on what needs to be delivered, right? We're talking about the product. We're talking about your customer support and sales. We're talking about, in my case, like fulfillment warehouses. We're talking about customer support, legal, policy folks, like you name it. Plan everything in advance, or plan everything in advance. The story I want to tell you is that I launched a product, small feature, late last year, and it was September end that it was supposed to go live. I think I got everything planned. Everything was covered in my work back plan. Things were going great. And then, of course, a small issue happens, and hey, I want to get this out, but no, it's not possible. You have to contact this POC. Great, let me contact her. Oh, wait, she's gone for a week? Okay, 1 week delayed launch. She comes back, yep, we need to do this. No, you can't do this because this team needed this. Oh, okay, let me go work on that. And then another week gone. Hey, I got this, great, now go back to this person. Okay, delivered. Now you're 3 weeks behind. And that's kind of the reality of things. Just like that one person's gone, you can't execute and build this. So you need to have kind of a bulletproof roadmap, and you need to account for all the edge cases, right? That's really important. And when you do that, the work pays off. You'll launch it on time, and it'll look good on you. It'll look good on your team. And law 1 is never outshine the master, right? So don't try to think you are better than your director or your manager in any sense or form. Make sure they are heard and respected, and that's going to go a long way. Meaning, If they have the idea in the room, let them deliver it, and then you kind of merge that idea in your roadmap in some way or another to make them feel included, right? So don't try to say you're better than them. Work together. That's the winning strategy. And then lastly, and this I think involves any type of position, is assume formlessness. So you need to adapt to the different changing landscape all the time. Things are not consistent. If it was consistent, that would be a weird job. Like everything is up and down. It's ever changing, and you need to be able to adapt, still launch things, still build things with that ambiguity. Right? It's important. And so you need to shapeshift when things go down. An example of this, back in 23, there were some layoffs that Amazon had, many companies had in 2023. And so our organization needed to adapt with less resources on certain projects. How do we then figure out the right resourcing strategy? How do we then figure out what is important for our customer with less resources? So you have to assume formlessness. So with that, let's talk about how we work with tech teams, because that's a different ballgame, in my opinion, and I think it deserves a different section in its own. So with engineering specifically and business, right, we need to understand kind of their kind of key functions and their goals. And so with engineering, they like the details. They typically answer the how, and they always are good in bringing timelines to us as product owners. They know the development effort, and they have their certain agile rituals. With business, though, it's more about what's the impact that I'm bringing. I'm trying to answer the why. I'm answering the what. I give lots of demos and essentially, be part of these business reviews. At least we call them business reviews at Amazon, weekly, monthly, quarterly. And so those are kind of our two sides. And so our goal is to marry communication with these two different factions and teams such that we can both achieve our goals, right? So for me, always clearly defining the why goes a long way. Engineers, sometimes they might be shy to ask about it, but if you give them a good, clear context as to why something needs to be built, they are going to feel more impactful in the work that they do, which means they're more likely than not going to want to build a better product for you, right? If you give them, hey, I just want you to build this widget because, it's important, just go build it. You're not really selling anything, right? You have to kind of sell, hey, if you build this widget, we're going to actually impact 5,000 customers in the next 2 months. And I'm like, oh, that's a good resume talking point. Okay, I want to help you, right? So it's about how you kind of sell the why, but also include the why, right? And include some data. Data is key. Again, build some mutual respect and empathy. This here is really about you as the product owner understanding the technical challenges, right? You have to speak their language. To do that, you need to understand the tech systems. You need to understand the architecture, the services that are running underneath the hood, why certain decisions were made before. And when you do understand that, they'll respect you as well, right? And then, you participating in, let's say, their rituals such as retrospectives or their sprint planning also goes a long way, right? You getting FaceTime with them instead of being kind of like a silent leader, you become an active participant. That goes a long way. So for my experience, it works well. It just takes a while to do right, because on the tech side of things, it's hard to grasp sometimes. But if you do it well, over time, you can kind of learn anything. And then you can even explain to leaders, hey, if there was a tech gap or issue or bug that caused the system to go down, you can explain the tech now to the leader in a simplified language, and also still work with engineering. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. And one thing that I really think is important is being transparent, right? So I do think it's a win-win if you do not hide information from your team. If you get access to information, you should share it, and share it in a way such that it's useful and beneficial to them, right? So let's say I'm going to write a product requirement document, and I'm going to have reviews with my manager on it. Why not include your sales, your implementation, your engineering, your design, all these different functions to read, understand, kind of be part of the journey, right? Why not let them be part of it versus kind of omit it and then assume, hey, did Nick actually listen to what I was trying to build? Or did he just ignore all my opinions and he didn't bring that voice into his business requirement? So to me, that's important. And I think we've gone through be technical enough, so I think we're good there. All right, so quick picture if you want to take it. Some best practices when you talk with tech and some quick actionable steps. You're going to get the slide deck after, so don't worry. But these are good ways to kind of get more, I would say, better practices with your tech team. So now let's do the fun thing. Let's do kind of a case study, right? Let's go deep into how I was thinking through launching an e-commerce store for a specific set of customers and kind of go through the flow of what we just learned, right? Our go-to-market, involving a little bit about the product strategy, and then talking about what worked, what didn't work. We'll go through that as well. So that's the goal there. So first things first, with our launch to Canada, that's where the marketplace I like to target, I'm only going to focus on commercial large enterprises for this e-commerce store. Not interested in consumer, so we don't need to worry about that section. Also with product selection, I'm also not interested in everything else besides office supplies. So we're going to focus on that. And I'm giving myself a timeline of 1 year to launch this entire experience, what it's going to look like, entail, et cetera. And then we will get marketing and sales involved. And assuming that we don't have any existing customers in Canada, that's kind of our parameters of launching this experience. So knowing that, let's start from the top. What is our goal? Our goal in this case, and it's kind of very wordy, but it has all the data, is expanding to a marketplace in Canada with that given date, right? And I want to get this many customers, 2K, to adopt our e-commerce store with some expectation of revenue to be 10 million, right? So again, when your leader reads something like this, great, it has all the details it needs of a SMART goal, and you're more than likely to not going to get it through, and then you just need to execute on it. Success criteria also are important. This is a very dimmed down version of success criteria. You would go very specific and very granular, but for an e-commerce site, what's most important? GMV, right? Gross merchandise volume and transactions, as with like Amazon, customer NPS, because this is a B2B offering, and then also order success rate. How many orders came through, how many were fulfilled correctly, shipped, delivered, et cetera. So your basic e-commerce metrics. Now, the product strategy for something like this involves the following. We need to solve some B2B problems, right, in our Canada launch. There could be problems related to, hey, I can't find good suppliers to deliver on time, or my suppliers don't have great selection, right? We want to solve those gaps. The segment is for office supply customers. We think of that as government agencies, commercial, strategic kind of Fortune 500 lookalike companies in Canada, right? That would be our segment. Our main value prop is easy. We want to bring ease of use to buying and shopping, bring better selection, low prices to the market, right? This is kind of how Amazon thinks in their value proposition. And then we need to also make sure we have that competitive edge, meaning are we better than, let's say, the Walmarts of the Walmart Canada or Staples or Business Depot, whatever they have in Canada? Can we be better than them, right? Because they offer similar things. Can we compete with them? And then lastly, we'll focus on distribution, which is the acquiring and retaining of customers. So the first part of our go-to-market strategy is the market research, right? Have we looked at the customer insights, meaning are customers sensitive to certain prices? What are their preferences in Canada? Do they shop more local? Do they like buying international goods, right? What kind of payment methods do they use? Is it similar to the US? What's the return behavior look like? You kind of have to think about it from an e-commerce lens and figure out if it makes sense to even launch, right? Your goal at market research is not saying, hey, we've already decided that we want to launch. It's more so understanding if there is a gap, can we solve it, and are we the right team to solve it? So that's what market research is. You'd look at the competitive landscape. You'd look at even regulatory research. And given all the work or all the news that we've been hearing lately with tariffs and whatnot, it becomes even more vital to know how to build an e-commerce store with that in mind, right? I'll give you an example. If, let's say, we want to build our e-commerce site in Canada and maybe want to have a warehouse or a couple fulfillment centers built in Canada, that solves the tariff problem because we're sourcing locally in Canada, buying locally, there's no tariffs and whatnot. As soon as we want to design a store that has warehouses in the US and we ship over to Canada, that changes things now. Tariffs are involved. How does that change our margins? How does that change our revenue? It might change a lot. It also might delay the shopping experience, right? A delivery of 1 day now goes to 2 weeks or 1 week, right? So it becomes very important to do your research early and upfront to understand what product to build for your customer. Also, in Canada, there is a different language requirement. So in the US, we have English, Spanish. In Canada, it's English and French. We need to make sure we localize our tech when building it out for English and French. I think they have government requirements where you cannot build or have any product launched unless it supports English and French. So that's a government federal mandate, and so it'll be important for that. And then lastly, whenever you do market research, it's always good to have projections. So if you have a finance team member within your company, you'd work closely with them to project, let's say 2-3 years out, what that revenue potential looks like. This is kind of good for a few things. One, it shows leaders that yes, there is potentially a interesting, exciting opportunity for our company to target if we launch globally. So we want to invest. Or it kind of makes our, team excited that, hey, this is a big, impactful project. I want to work on it, right? I want to drive and be the owner of this. So there's multiple kind of, pros when kind of sharing projections. Now, a lot of stuff in this slide, product lifecycle, right? This slide here goes into detail how, let's say, a product owner needs to think about what features are needed in an e-commerce store, right? So if we talk about the website and the mobile app, you need to make sure it supports Canadian currency. You need to make sure you have the right address formats, right? It's not a zip code like here in the US. It's actually a postal code in Canada, right? And these nuances change how your e-commerce store needs to act and operate, especially at checkout, right? Number 2, product catalog. Since our catalog is office supplies, it does narrow things and makes things easy, but what if we cannot get our selection from Canada? What if we need to get it from other regions around the world? What does that look like, right? How do we forecast the demand of those products being in our store so that way our customers can then buy and get it quickly and get it cheaply, right? So different things that a product person would need to figure out and understand, right? With payments and taxes, this is a huge one. This was actually one of my least favorite things of launching a store. And I just hate accounting and I hate tax. I really do. And so with accounting, you need to make sure you follow the accounting principles of like a public company, which is, hey, you need to kind of share these quarterly earnings, results and whatnot. You need to share these fiscal numbers. And so it becomes paramount to get the accounting right for anything that is bought, for anything that is taxed. And it can be sometimes a nightmare, right? With taxes, it's not like the US, right? Canada has GST, it has PST, HST, it's like all these other taxes, right? At the sales side. And so you need to be able to configure your product to handle those, right? And what does that perception then change? Let's say a B2B customer from buying from your solution versus going to like another competitor, right? So again, you have to be kind of clear with these requirements early in the life cycle of your product, right? And I think once you do it early and kind of to that point, planning ahead, you will be successful and you'll be able to launch something with least minimum amount of problems. Number 4 is the shipping and fulfillment and returns, right? These are all like big teams, by the way. These are not like small teams. Each one of these has usually like 30, 40 people, maybe more that you need to work with. And so shipping, right? It's massive. You have tons of warehouses. We need new warehouses whenever we launch in Canada or Australia, you name it. We need to have these kind of facilities there in order to get that selection, to get that cost down, right? And with Canada, you'll have to probably look at local logistics partners, right? Maybe a Canada Post for the mailing and whatnot distribution side of it. You might need to set up a return center, right? So the investment up front seems very expensive, right? The things that I'm telling you right now, it sounds expensive. And if you saw the slide before, right, how much projected revenue are we going to get in year 2026? 10 million. I mean, some of these warehouses might be a couple million, if not more. So that's where you need to kind of share these projections, share these values, and the cost of doing business in another region, right? Because I think, to me, that's critical. Now, the product lifecycle is useful. Now, let's apply like a timeline to it, right? What does that look like? So if we take our 9 different elements and we're 12 months before launch, you see most of the effort is concentrated earlier in the beginning, which is your requirements gathering, building out your catalog, doing all the engineering work, and the accounting and tax workflows. You do all the heavy lifting up front, Then you kind of save more of the legal reviews. You kind of figure out your shipping, fulfillment later, and your customer support readiness, right? But I think to me, this strategy worked well with our team at Amazon, and then we were able to deliver our store in time. So something to consider when building out timelines with your program manager, product owner, et cetera. Now, for distribution, right, what are good channels for us to use for an e-commerce site? I think these are some good examples. So specifically with SEO, again, create more white papers, more ebooks about the solution and essentially the problem you are targeting. So that way, prospective customers can come in and use your storefront. Same thing with social media. That would be more relevant and paid ads a bit later after launch, in my opinion, just because people might not have access to your product just yet. Once you have the product out on the market, you can do more paid push advertising, right? In the beginning, before launch, industry events are very good, and you can slowly start to do account-based marketing. So what does account-based marketing look like? It's essentially targeting the entire business, not just a decision maker. And so you would do that to kind of spray content that is relevant to someone at the company, and eventually you'll get a decision maker to then adopt your store for your business, right? And then something that's unique in direct outreach is RFPs. So RFPs are requests for proposals. In a B2B world, these are very important because these give key requirements that the business wants from, or that the customer wants to the business. So for example, if let's say there is a school district in Canada that wants to do business with my e-commerce store, they're going to send me an RFP that details office supplies, that details, hey, I want delivery every 3 weeks. I want it in bulk, and can you satisfy these requirements? If I get those ahead of time, I can actually build the right solution for them with my store and then win the deal, right? That's more of a B2B way of thinking. B2C, very different. But in a B2B sense, timelines are a little bit longer. You can be flexible, but they normally give you requirements, which is nice. So how does this work in the timeline, right? If you look, the timeline is, let's say, 6 months out before launch and 6 months out after launch. And with B2B, like I was saying, there's various stages of a customer and their journey, which is the awareness stage, the consideration stage, and the decision stage. And so it's up to you to target the right marketing and the sales activities earlier, before product launch versus after. So like I was saying earlier, do your proposals and RFPs earlier before launch, or be able to create these blog posts and do some sort of LinkedIn, retargeting of ads earlier, as opposed to later in your launch cycle. You can just straight up send out paid ads and hopefully get the ROI that you need on those, or do more account-based marketing after the fact. So this works really well, I think. And then when you actually launch your product, so finally it's launch day, this is again part of your go-to-market, you want to make sure everybody is all hands, your engineers, your support team, implementation, all of the various stakeholders that were part of your journey, kind of almost like thanking them in a way, getting them in a room or getting them on a call, and being able to go live together, right? And making sure that there's no hiccups, there's no bumps. Did we successfully get orders to flow through in our store? Once the orders come through and there's no hiccups, you've successfully launched the e-commerce storefront. And normally, like I said earlier, there's like a lot of teams involved. These were some of the various functions that I needed to be involved with in order to launch an e-commerce store. And as you can see, there's tons and tons of people. I would say close to 75 plus people that I would need to work with, at least at Amazon, to launch something like this. And again, it's a big undertaking because you need to make sure all of those different systems talk to each other, they're all working, there are no gaps and problems. Amazon has a very high bar with launching in new regions, and if it's not there, they don't launch. So setting that high bar teaches you to, essentially value everybody's time. You have to communicate with kind of the rules and stuff that I shared in this talk. And then it will make you a better product leader in the long run. So that's who's involved. So with that, you now have a playbook to launch globally. So hopefully that was interesting for all of you. Quick recap, again, of what we discussed. So again, we kind of went through a GTM strategy. We went through some Agile frameworks and how they can be leveraged. We focused on how to collaborate best using different principles from the 48 laws of power, and then we did a quick case study on launching an e-commerce store. So with that, if I open the floor to any questions, comments, and you can feel free to scan the QR code for this deck or connect with me on LinkedIn. But yeah, happy to entertain questions. There you are.
Nick, thank you very much. I have two questions in here. One, you talked a lot about revenue to sort of highline the use case that you've got for Canada. Where does the product margin and NOI and anything else in that equation to understand profitability and break even if there's a lot of capital CapEx that goes into it? How does that work out?
That normally is included. So typically when you do, at least how we do market research at Amazon, is we write large, maybe like 3-4 page documents. So we're a doc culture. So we're writing all of this information to our leaders and analyzing what is the CapEx, what is the OpEx, does it financially make sense with our margins, how much does it eat into the margin, does it not, do these product selection, meaning office supplies, eat into the margin or do they not? And so it's kind of carefully, I would say, planned with finance and also with product and with leaders, but it's something that we would do earlier on. So to your point, I've omitted them from the presentation, but it's something we would project out earlier on.
All right, thank you. Second one is the French language. Last time I did an integration with Canada, that was only for Quebec. So I'm assuming for this exercise, Quebec was assumed as part of that integration.
Quebec is part of Canada, so it's assumed.
Choice. I just want to be clear.
I know they're not the best of provinces with Canada. They don't want to be part of Canada. You're right.
That's all right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
You were talking about getting sales involved inside that with regards to feedback. So one thing, what about betas and pilots? Like, is that enough for a product, especially with global markets? Because my company is a global, and we tend to get feedback because our product teams are AMS in the Americas, and then we're selling products in EMEA and APAC, and so we're not engaging the salespeople there, which might have different feedback. So I'm just wondering your perspective on that.
Yes, so typically you do want to have a beta, and with my launch within Amazon, yes, we had a beta to start. It's important to make sure it is a beta that doesn't impact a lot of customers. So it could be a small subset to just prove orders are flowing through, your systems are talking to each other, they're correct. It could be, for example, high utilization customers that are using your product quite frequently. You target them for your beta and then eventually open it up to the broader audience. So it's a good strategy to do. It shows, let's say, your team and leaders that, hey, they're taking a very methodological kind of approach to launching and a safer approach, right? If you launch something right off the gate, day one, and there's problems and bugs, you're more likely than not going to feel those effects. It won't look good, I guess, on your team or whoever you're working with. So I'd say better to do betas, smaller customer subset, and learn from that and share that with others and see if you can open the doors or dial up, for example, that experience after. So it works.
You mentioned the importance of market research. So say you set this goal, but then you embark in the market research and you realize, oh man, we just can't compete with Walmart Canada. We can't, the tariffs are just going to kill us. Like, how often do these goals just, the market research reveals, like, we should not move forward? And then when that happens, like, how does that go over? Because I feel like at my company, we tend to just say, well, we're just going to do this thing, regardless of what the data tells us one way or another.
Right. So it's an excellent question. Are you in like mid-size or like a pretty small? Okay. You should you shouldn't be having that type of experience for a small company. I'd say that I hear those in big corporates all the time, right? Like at Amazon, it makes sense. It can come top down, no doubt. It can also come bottom up if the data is presented well, and if there's buy-in coming from your manager and your manager's manager and whatnot, you can move the needle and say, hey, here's a case. At Amazon, we always present documents to our leaders that are like kind of hotly debated topics. So if that's a hotly debated topic saying, hey, there is no margin here, we're actually going to go out of business if we do this, you make a presentation and you share it and book a time with your manager or somebody else and explain the case. And hopefully somebody hears it and understands it and your data makes sense. They need to take a call and hopefully they don't launch it, right, if it doesn't make financial sense. Typically, VPs and directors are smart people, so usually they know what they're doing. But yeah, I mean, in your case, smaller company, you still should use data to inform and still use that to persuade if you can. So I still think that's a win-win if you can do that, but harder to do in a smaller company, no doubt. Yeah.
We have 4 minutes left.
So you talked about the bridging the gap between engineering and business teams. As a member of the engineering team, I think you were spot on with that. But I'd also like to know what are some questions or things I need to be mindful of for the product owner when we're having conversations in the beginning about a tool maybe they want.
And this is from the point of an engineer leveraging, or you wanting the PM to try and adopt a new tool with the engineers in mind? Or
I, as an engineer, want to know what questions I need to ask the product owner.
Okay. So, yes, and this is for like an internal tool or it's something?
An internal tool.
Internal tool. Okay. I think high level, some key questions that you can ask your product owner and your PM might be, how can we best work together easily together? Meaning, if I want to get my user tickets and stories out, and the product owner needs to work on creating those tickets for engineering to see, what are tools that we can use and leverage? For example, Jira, anything in the Atlassian family. You could use Miro, like whatever is easy for engineering to then work with product easily, right? So that could be one question. You could ask questions related to what's your working style, right? If the PM's working style is this way, do you want to adopt that working style? Do you want to bring in certain sprint rituals? If the PM wants to do that, then work with him or her on that, right? So like kind of ask what things are going to benefit both of you when working together. That's how I would look at that. And again, sometimes if it doesn't work, then you try something new. But do something until you get to a point where, hey, this is actually working. Let's keep this model, right? And keep trying if it's not working. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hey there. You were talking about the relationship between product and sales, and the goals that you set sometimes have a really long tail, right? And so by the time that an organization might reach that target is months, quarters after a launch. So like, can you talk to me a little bit about how product, right, how long should they be engaged in that goal? Because they're probably moving on to building something else. And so like, that's always a tension that I've noticed in organizations is, right, products focus on that release. They kind of know that goal. And then it's, sometimes somebody else's problem or,
Yeah.
How do you think about that and how do you overcome that?
Right. It's definitely relevant, right? I think there's a few goals that I have in my roadmap now that are tied to the adoption of it. And right now, I do need help from sales to support that goal and hit it. Now, is it and should it be tied to product? I still think it should be, given that it is the product that you launched, and you do need to be able to show the success of it, right? You are trying to launch something that customers are using. If they're not using it, it's like it's not fully there. And so to your second question, how do you kind of work, I guess, with sales to deliver that? I would say get their buy-in early, work with them early to understand their needs, meaning there's only so many things sales can essentially sell, right? Certain features that are going to bring more revenue to the business than others. If my product is not one of those features, how can I best articulate maybe the value proposition in a different way to then help them push some of that product in a different package or some complementary package, right? How can I tell sales to work with me in a way? And again, doing that kind of engagement early rather than later. You do it early, more likely than not, you're going to win, and you can achieve your adoption goals together.
Well, I want to thank Nick, and let's all put our hands together for Nick. Thank you so much for an excellent presentation. And before you go, pick up your tag and turn it over.